It's a great honor, a real great honor to talk about such a great personality as Tattopan Tengri. In fact, very frankly, I'm not telling it out of any humility. Let me be very frank. I don't even know if I am fit enough to talk about if I have the, or what you can call the adhigaratu or whatever, even the basic qualities to talk about Tattopan Tengri, Maharishi. He was a Maharishi who lived in our times, and so what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to show my respects to him. Nothing more. I'm going to show my respects to him. So this is essentially a dedication at his feet and for his sacred memory. Tattopan Tengri was born in 1920 and in Maharashtra. When he grew up, it was freedom movement was there, and Tattopan Tengri was very much interested. His father was a very successful criminal lawyer. Tattopan used to organize boys and used to participate in freedom struggle demonstrations and all that when he was a small boy. And his father got very much angry with him and told him that if you are going to do this, I'm not going to feed you. And Tattopan, it was a very hot summer day, and Tattopan Tengri said, okay, I won't have food, but I am not going to give up my activism. This is the little kid Tattopan Tengri. And as he grew up, he got attracted by RSS Shagas, and then at one point of time he wanted to become a pracharak, and like all parents who get a real jolt when their child comes and tells them that when their son comes and tells that I want to become a pracharak, they too said no, you don't become a pracharak and all that. But Tattopan Tengri was very persistent at that time. His mother remembered something. When he was pregnant, there were some problems, and his mother prayed to Tattatreya that if a son is born in a very healthy, safe way, then he would be dedicated to Tattatreya through the service of Tattatreya. And so now she remembered that, and then she said, okay, let us not argue, let us give him for the sake of the nation. And then the parents personally took him to Guruji Golwalkar and garlanded Guruji, gave him a coconut as a symbol and respect, a symbol of respect, and gave Tattopan Tengri, telling that you should allow him then and then at times to come back home and be with us for some time, so that we would feel we would not feel very lonely and all that. Tattopan Tengri, one important aspect in Tattopan Tengri's life is that Guruji shaped him like anything. And he guided him through not just the routine Sangh Pracharak work. He had been a Pracharak in Kerala, he had been a Pracharak in Bengal. But one important aspect that Guruji did for Tattopan Tengri is that he made him work in varied fields at his formative age. In fact, Tattopan Tengri worked with the giants. And one of the important aspects in Tattopan Tengri's life, a transformative aspect, is that he was made to work with none other than Baba Saheb Ambedkar. So Tattopan Tengri was working as a close associate of Baba Saheb Ambedkar, so much so that he was made the election agent of Ambedkar when he stood in the Mumbai constituency election. And the interactions with Baba Saheb Ambedkar had very strong influence on Tattopanji's life. He always reported whatever conversations that he had with Dr. Ambedkar. So Dr. Ambedkar, one day they were talking, and Tattopanji said, Dr. Ambedkar, why you had to get converted to another religion, into Buddhism? See, you take the example of Sangha. In Sangha, there is no untouchability, there is no caste discrimination. You yourself know, you had visited the Sangha Magar Sankranti function, you had presided over when Dr. Hedgewar was there. So, why not you join the RSS instead of getting converted to Buddhism? Then Dr. Ambedkar said, but you people are a very small people. It is a small group. And then Tathaband Ingreji said, now we are very small, but in due course of time, this organization is going to grow in a very big way. Then Dr. Ambedkar said, when I said small, what I actually meant is this. These are the words of Dr. Ambedkar, as reported by Tathaband Ingreji. You take your Golwalkar. If suppose tomorrow your Golwalkar says that there is no Shastric justification of untouchability, there is no scriptural injunction that supports untouchability in Hinduism. And then some Acharya from a traditional Ved, he says there is scriptural injunctions which support untouchability. Whom words do you think carry weight with the entire Hindu society? Tathaband Ingreji thought about it and said, of course, the Shankaracharyas or whatever the Acharyas words are going to have the weight and not that of Guruji Golwalkar. Then he said, Dr. Ambedkar said, this is what I said, your organization is small, not the numerical strength. Then Tathaband Ingreji reported this to Guruji Golwalkar and asked if Dr. Ambedkar was right in this assessment. Remember, all these times, Tathaband Ingreji was in his formative ages, adolescence. And Guruji Golwalkar said, yes, what Dr. Ambedkar says is absolutely right. If we want to remove untouchability, we have to do it through the traditional heads. And that seed thought, which he got from Dr. Ambedkar, through Tathaband Ingreji, worked on Guruji Golwalkar's mind. When Vishwa Hindu Parishad was established in the Udupi conference in 1969, I think, he made that historical resolution passed by a scheduled community IAS officer and endorsed by all the Madhadhipatis and Bidadhipatis of various sampradayas sitting on the dais, that there is no place for untouchability in Hindu society according to the Shastras. No Hindu is downtrodden. All Hindus are brothers and sisters. So you see how Tathaband Ingreji was instrumental in creating a historical milestone in the history of Hindu society. This is one aspect. Another aspect is he wanted to work in the labor field. Guruji Golwalkar said, you go join trade unions and find out how they work and then you start a trade union. But when you are working in the trade union, make sure that you work with all sincerity in tune with that trade union's values and the value system, provided it does not clash with your own innate core values. If it clashes with your core values, you resign and come. If it does not clash with your core values, then you have to stand by that system and work. The same thing Tathaband Ingreji did. Then in 1955, Tathaband Ingreji started Bharatiya Mastu Sangh. Now I think it is November, it is, the date is July 23rd. It was on the day of Vishwakarma Divas that they started the Bharatiya Mastu Sangh. Bharatiya Mastu Sangh was very different from the trade union organizations that were there already in the society. If a trade union organization is right-wing, then it would be supporting the cause of the capitalism. If a trade union is essentially left-wing, then it would support the cause of the workers. At the same time, the left-wing trade union will also have a vision of creating a socialist society. If it is creating disruptions in the society, the aim of those disruptions is that it should finally achieve the goal of a totalitarian communist society. So if you look at the way the trade unions function, the student union, leftist student unions function, it will be very interesting. The trade union in say a transport corporation run by the state, let us take a transport corporation run by a state. There, the trade union of workers would be shouting against the reduction of pay. They want more pay and all that. Whereas the Marxist student unions simultaneously would be doing an agitation to reduce the bus fares. So what they want to do is they want to show that the capitalist system or the free market system is untenable, that ultimately it has to break down so that the socialist system should come. So you have either the socialist system or the capitalist system, but here, Pradhoban Dingadi said, let us make the resources, the labor force is also part of the national resource, and whether the capitalists as well as the workers, they should come together for the good of the society. So he doesn't tell that there should be no capitalism. Capitalism should be there, but the capitalism should be tempered by the concern for the good of the society. So he developed, at that time itself, he started developing a particular alternative way of looking at things rooted in Hindu society, rooted in the Hindu values, Hindu tradition. Then he studied very, very clearly the Marxist method, the Marxist system, and he came to the conclusion that Marxist system is untenable. It cannot be supported by the very tenets of Marxism. So he gave a very wonderful lecture in 1980. Remember, in 1980, Marxism was seen as a kind of a scientific alternative to capitalism by all the post-colonial countries. That was the dominant thinking. Socialism, if somebody says socialism, it was considered as scientific. Just as how today, if you want to sell something very effectively, then you add scientific to it, or quantum to it, or Vedic to it, then it becomes a fashion. You can tell Vedic tea, you can tell Vedic toothpaste, you can tell quantum engine, you can tell all those kind of things. Then the same way, in 1970s and 1980s, if you just add the term socialist to something, then it becomes very scientific, it becomes very progressive. It is at this particular point of time that Pradhoban Dingadi took Marxism and he looked into it and he said, I am going to see the value of Marxism from Marxist point of view. He said very clearly, he says very clearly, I am not going to look at Marxism from the Sanatana Hindu point of view. I am not going to look at Marxism from a capitalist point of view. I am going to look at Marxism from the very Marxist point of view, and I am going to show you how Marxism is totally unscientific. By the very basis of Marxism, Marxism would implode and it will not stand. So he takes it, for example, he takes dialectical materialism, and then he shows that dialectical materialism is only a kind of a belief system rather than a real movement in matter and history. So the historical materialism, dialectical materialism, the historical dialectics, he says all these things are fine, but in reality that is not how it works. In reality it works in very different ways. There is very pluralist ways of things working out, and hence you cannot contain them all into one particular single methodology. Then if you are going to do that, it is going to fail. Definitely it is going to fail. That is the first part that he says. Then he comes to the mind and consciousness, and he says consciousness cannot be an emergent property. Consciousness has to be the fundamental property, and it is from this fundamental property that the matter emerges, and hence to say that matter is different and consciousness is an emergent property of matter is wrong. He comes to that, and after that he comes to the historical dialectics, and he points out that if strictly Marxist dynamics are followed, then actually the revolution should come not in China or Russia. It should have come in United States or Germany or England, but it did not happen. And hence, the very fact that the so-called revolution has happened in China and Russia, which are basically agrarian countries, that itself is a state, that itself is a falsification of Marxism. Then he goes on to the value systems. He says that value system is very fundamental, and Marxism thinks that value system is a construct over the economic relationships. This particular point of view of the value system being a construct over economic relationships, and hence the value systems are imposed on human society by dominant classes, is wrong, because value system comes from dharma, and hence we cannot say that the value system is a superstructure. When he says that, this was in 1980s, and there were no, we can say it would more look like a wishful thinking. But then we now know that value system definitely is not a superstructure, but it is fundamental. There is this famous experiment where the macaque monkeys, the monkeys were given food only if they would administer electric shock to a companion monkey in the split windows other side. So the monkey could see that when it presses a lever, the other monkey gets electric shock, but this monkey would get also a food pellet. What this monkey did, and this is something that Carl Sagan records, what the monkey did was it would go on without food rather than give electric shock to a fellow monkey, unrelated monkey, right in front of it. He says that this empathy was there in the monkeys. According to Marxism, empathy is something that gets constructed by the relations, economic relations, the production relations. So here is a very, very vindication of what Tattopan Tengri wrote. And Tattopan Tengri was also influenced by the integral humanism of Deen Dayal Upadhyaya. Coming back to this particular aspect of his deconstruction of Marxism, he points out, sometimes he becomes very, he was also a very humorous person. So he says that if you look at Marxism, ultimately the Marxism was yielding to nationalism. So every Marxist in every Marxist country was calling the Marxism in another country as deviationism. So what has happened is the world communism has become equal to world deviationism. So for Czechoslovakians, the Soviets were deviationists. For the Soviets, the Chinese were deviationists. For the Maoists, the Vietnamese were deviationists. For the Vietnamese Marxists, Chinese Marxists were deviationists. In India, for the CPI, the CPI-M were deviationists. For the CPI-M, the CPI was deviationist. For the CPI-ML, both CPI and CPI-M were deviationists. So the entire, this is a very interesting and a very funny way in which he says, very humorous way he says this. So the entire world communism, which talks about all humanity being one, ends up being world deviationism, and that world deviationism is essentially based on nationalism and the national boundaries. And yet Marxism was talking about internationalism. So these kind of basic discrepancies were there in Marxism, he pointed out. That was in 1980s. And his famous book, The Third Way, it is not exactly a book, it is a collection of, like Banjab Thoughts, it's a collection of articles that he had, talks and articles that he had written, talks he had given and all that. But there is also another one, very beautiful book he had written on Deen Dayal Upadhyaya. And this particular book, he points out how the present system that we see, the economic system that we see, it predicates itself on Cartesian worldview. So you have the Cartesian worldview, from the Cartesian worldview, you have a Newtonian worldview, and this looks at the entire universe as a kind of a big machine. And from this Newtonian worldview, you have the present mechanistic view of the society. And he also adds that social Darwinism was also a factor which was working for ruthless exploitation of humanity. So here he was concentrating on this larger picture of how a paradigm shift changes us from a capitalist society to a more harmonious society. From he saw both, this is also another important thing, he saw both Marxist socialist setup as well as the capitalist setup as a result of the Newtonian model. And in this he was very much vindicated again, because the power structure of a socialist state was based on this Newtonian model. If you look at countries where the quantum mechanics emerged, there the power structure was not so strongly based on the Newtonian model. So if the Newtonian model was yielding itself to the new physics, they didn't care much. Whereas in the case of Marxist states, it was not so. The power structure itself would crumble if they are going to accept this new physics. So they started a inquisition on scientists. That is another topic. But the point is, Marxism was a closed system. This Tattvapanth Thengiriji arrived at very easily. But what he also saw was that the capitalist system was no better. It may have freedom, but it was totally lacking in creating common good. And he also was one of the earliest thinkers to talk about environmental pollution and link it to economics, and say that if we are going to exploit the natural resources, then our economy is going to get shattered, and the people are going to, common people are going to suffer. So he was able to make this connection. When ecology, environmentalism, etc. were fad of elite people, he was able to see the connections and say that the environmental pollution is going to affect the people. That these were all he was doing in 1970s also. And he was, as I said, influenced very much by Deen Dayal Upadhyaya's integral humanism. And he pointed out that when there is Freudianism, Freudianism concentrated only on libido or karma. Both Adam Smith and Karl Marx, they were concentrating only on artha. And then there were people like Nietzsche who were concentrating only on power. They were compartmentalizing the human organism. And whereas we need to have artha, kama, dharma, and moksha. Thus, he was able to see integral humanism as a wonderful template through which we can study the individual and the society. So you have the individual, and around the individual, like the oceanic circles, you have the different expansions. So this is another one aspect of Tattvapanth Thengiriji. He was a system thinker. In fact, he was the only politician who was, or political activist, not politician, sorry. He was the only political activist who was talking about Fritjof Capra's paradigm shift. If you look at the entire political scenario or social scenario of India, even the spiritual people, I am not talking about just the political people, the spiritual people. You see, even today, if somebody is talking about Fritjof Capra, they would be talking about Tao of physics. After that, they won't look at his works. Tattvapanth Thengiriji was the only person who was able to look at the next book that he wrote, Paradigm Shift, and the book that he wrote, it was Uncommon Wisdom. He studied all those things. He was a voracious reader. He studied all those things, and he was also a person who had to just read a book once and he would grasp the whole thing in his mind. And he synthesized it. Always he synthesized it with the Indian wisdom, indigenous wisdom, and he was looking out how I can integrate this and apply it. So this is an important aspect of Tattvapanth Thengiriji. And he always wanted to be a critic of the system. A person who would always study the system and point out this has to be corrected, this has to be corrected, this has to be corrected in a positive way. So, as a consequence of this, he would never accept any position in any government. When in 1977, Morarji government came, Morarji Desai personally called Tattvapanth Thengiriji and told him, you become the Central Labour Minister. Tattvapanth Thengiriji said, no, I don't want to become Central Labour Minister. I want always to be an activist, a person who works for the betterment of the laborers and create a good relation between the laborers, the natural resources, the material resources, the capitalists, the society. He saw these linkages, and he understood that the importance of the system, the vitality of the system was not in the entities themselves, but in the links between these entities. And because of that, he was able to strengthen the relation between the labor and the producers and the consumers. Because of this approach, this novel approach, BMS was able to grow very fast. And it was also able to take a path which was simultaneously progressive but was not destructive. So this trade union system developed like anything. It became the largest trade union in India, etc. And again, when Janata government was there, the Janata government wanted Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh to become the labor union of Janata Party. That also Tattopan Tengedi said no. Later, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee government came, they wanted to give him Padma Awards. And Tattopan Tengedi said no, I don't want all these awards. I am not working for awards. So he was a very, very great karma yogi. That is one aspect of Tattopan Tengedi. Another is, he also started another organization, Swadeshi Jagran Manch. Now, if you look at Swadeshi Jagran Manch, it has unfortunately over the period of time earned a kind of a reputation that it is totally against all kind of innovations, all kind of foreign inflows, everything. It is not so. Tattopan Tengedi visualized Swadeshi as a way of life. It was not just an economic slogan, it was not a political slogan, it was a way of life. So he wanted not only us to use Swadeshi products, he also wanted to have Swadeshiized products. For example, you have cool drinks, the carbonated drinks. Tattopan Tengedi was not very much interested in these carbonated drinks. They were the Swadeshi drinks. You had a Gold Spot, you had Thumbs Up, you had Limca, and these were the Swadeshi drinks. And you had Coca-Cola and you have Pepsi-Cola, and those were the foreign drinks. So let us consume the Swadeshi drinks, let us refuse the foreign drinks. What Tattopan Tengedi saw was that this particular very aspect of carbonated drinks, with its kind of consumerist advertisements and everything, that itself is Videshi. When you have to have industries, those industries have to come from your experiences, your value system. That is the deep Swadeshi. So when you don't have deep Swadeshi, then your superficial Swadeshi can easily be rubbed aside by the corporate Swadeshi that come, the corporate Videshi things that come from outside. Because when they come from outside, they are very good at this particular game, for which they are adapted through centuries already. You are not adapted, you don't belong to that value system. So what Tattopan Tengedi saw was right. When Pepsi and Coke came, they were able to completely wipe out the local carbonated drinks market, because this is not our market. This is not our technology. So this is another one aspect that Tattopan Tengedi saw. And he was the person who showed that Hindutva is not a right-wing concept. Hindutva doesn't have to do with this partitioning of right-wing and left. If you look at Tattopan Tengedi, he was a staunch Hindutvaite. At the same time, he was, if you look at his worldview, and if you want to categorize his worldview in the larger system, you have to say that it is basically left. It is not right. It is not a right-wing value system. In the global international mapping, you have to say that the worldview of Tattopan Tengedi, where it would come, would it come at the center or would it go to the right or the left? And we have to admit that it goes to the left. But even though it goes to the left, it is not Marxist. We have to understand the difference. He never made his worldview slave of an ideology. He made his worldview based on dharma. In his study on technologies also, he was talking about something called a kind of a technological ombudsman. This technological ombudsman should actually make sure that the technologies are creating technologies that are not harming the society, that is not harming the environment. Ultimately, it is creating good for the society. And from where you can get this, where you can get those kind of technological ombudsman, according to Tattvapanth Engineji, they have to come from people who are deeply spiritual. And he never saw spiritual as something that has to do with the dogmatism. In all these aspects, if you look at Tattvapanth Engineji's worldviews, you will find that it is rooted in India. At the same time, it can spread its branches everywhere and give shade. Whether you are a Mexican, whether you are a Brazilian, whether you are an African, you can use what Tattvapanth Engineji said in your own environment, in your own clan. That is another one beauty of Tattvapanth Engineji's works. Now, another one important movement that Tattvapanth Engineji started was social harmony movement, Samuga Samarajita movement. So he wanted that the social justice and social harmony had to exist in the society, and all the negative aspects of social stagnation should be removed. And for that, he created this organization, and this organization worked wonders. One important achievement of this organization was that there was the famous Kalaram Satyagraha, where Dr. Ambedkar wanted to enter the temple. And the priest of the temple said, no, you should not enter. The Samuga Samarajita movement, they made the son of the priest come and apologize to the Hindu society at large and the scheduled communities in particular that what he did was wrong. So this kind of achievements, symbolic achievements, were done by this particular movement. And Tattvapanth Engineji's vision for this movement comes from his encounter with Dr. Ambedkar. And he had even interviewed Dr. Ambedkar, and he had published it in Organizer, where Ambedkar rejects the Aryan invasion theory and says that you should, when you get converted, you have to take care of the national security, etc. Tattvapanth Engineji made sure that these particular aspects of Dr. Ambedkar had been recorded. So, Tattvapanth Engineji's worldview of his entire activism also, if you look at it, you will find that it has three components. One is his trade union activity. The trade union activity was based on creating harmony between labor and the society. Then there is the social activism. The social activism is based on creating harmony between various communities that exist in the society. Then you have a worldview that embraces the entire humanity and the world. You can say that it is a kind of an ecological thinking. And there he was creating a harmony between the natural world, the industrial world, and the human world. In all this, the underlying theme that has been running has been dharma. Tattvapanth Engineji's work, third way, it points out very clearly that if India wants to progress, then it cannot progress the way the West had been progressing. It has to change its entire look. It has to look for its own resources, its own sciences, its own industries. It has to create its own products and services. Then only India can evolve into a really developed Swadeshi nation. And in this, even today, his views are in conflict with a lot of the things that have been going on. So, in a way, he was always eternally in the opposition. He criticized very strongly foreign direct investment. And there are places where Tattvapanth Engineji too had been sort of wrong, one can say. One aspect was, when computers were introduced, Tattvapanth Engineji was against it. BMS was against it. And I remember a very interesting cartoon that came, in which the cartoon was specifically made for an article written by a BMS leader. And he said that he showed a computer throwing away all the workers out. Tadeuban Tengariji thought that the computer automation would actually kill employment and would create increased unemployment. But he was wrong. In computer and the digital technology, in many ways, helped what Tadeuban Tengariji envisioned. In this, Tadeuban Tengariji should be seen as a continuer of the thought process of Mahatma Gandhi, Deen Dayal Upadhyaya, Ram Swarup. If you look at all these three people's thoughts, you will find that all these thought streams have ended in Tadeuban Tengariji. He was the one who was taking it forward. And in this, he made a very robust scientific criticism of Marxism. He made a very robust humanistic criticism of capitalism, and he carved out a third way. And this third way is again based on dharma and creation of artha and fulfillment of karma, so that we can attain liberation. This was his scheme. And through this scheme, he was able to create an ideology, he was able to create a thought system and create a labor movement out of that thought system. He was not an idle thinker. He was not an idle thinker. He was not a person who would be sitting in the armchair and theorizing like, say, Karl Marx. But he was an activist, a person who would go directly and work. For example, his Samarasada Manch organization, they worked with the Pardis who were considered as criminal tribes. Whenever there was a theft in a particular place, a Pardi would be arrested and put into jail. And the parents of the children would be separated. Tadeuban Tengariji's organization went and worked with them, men and women. They used to stay with Pardis and they used to take care of the children. They used to go to the police stations, fight cases for them, and make sure that those people were not harassed, their human rights were not violated. All these things were done by the inspiration of Tadeuban Tengariji. So, if you look at Tadeuban Tengariji, his life was not a life in which there is only theory, kind of an armchair Vedanta. He had an Advaitic vision which he translated into action. And through this action, he transformed the lives of many people, various levels, from very ordinary people. He used to, when he was a member of parliament, his house, his place where he used to stay, all the workers used to come and they used to stay in his parliamentarian house. And suppose he comes and he sees that all the people were occupying all the places, he would go to a corner and he would take a small mat and he would sleep. He was a person with minimal needs and grand thinking. And in this, he was also supported by the Sangh, particularly H.V. Seshadri and Devarasji. Their thinking also synced with his thinking. And this created a movement that today stands as the largest trade union movement in India. And when the leftists were celebrating May Day as the Workers' Day, Tadeuban Tengariji introduced Viswakarma Divas as the Workers' Day for Bharatiya Mazdoor. So everywhere he was having his own unique vision of how to do things. So this is Tadeuban Tengariji, his contribution to our thought process. And if there are any questions, we will take it.
So thank you, Arvindanji, for this brief but very interesting session on Dattopanji. I think you have covered almost every aspect on which Dattopanji has left his deep contribution for Indian society. You have covered his contribution on Swadeshi front, as well as his thoughts on taking economic thoughts beyond left and right, which I think is the most important legacy in terms of thought system that he has left to us, because we are still into the trap of left and right, capitalism and communism. You have also covered that he was far ahead as far as thinkers in Europe are concerned, in term in areas of ecology in relation to economy. So ecological imbalance, ecological apocalypse that we are facing today, he can foresee it 3 decades back. Okay, and he wanted to integrate that into economy. So you've covered wide range of areas that he spoke on or wrote on, and now I open this session for discussion also. So we can have question and answer. So the first question that has come to us is from Jitin Bhai, I suppose. Arjun, can you see that? It will be difficult for me to take it from here.
Uh, Jitu Bhai is asking what would be his response to or advice to present Modi government?
With respect to the present Modi government, I think if we are talking very frankly, he would not be very comfortable with foreign direct investment. He would not be very comfortable with big projects. At the same time, he would have been extremely pleased with the way the vaccination and the way the pandemic has been managed by the government. He would have been a critic of the government in important, for example, in the labor laws, he would have been a critic of the government. Wherever the government has taken a right-wing stand on an economic front, he would have criticized the government. He would have said that it is not right. With respect to farm laws, most probably he would have supported the government. With respect to, as I said, the labor laws, he would have opposed the government. With respect to FDI, he would have opposed the government. And I'm with respect to the FDI in by the connection of the Make in India, he would have been pleased with the Make in India actually. And Make in India in military, he would have been pleased with. At the same time, he would have wanted India to phase out the foreign companies by our own indigenous companies, developing our own indigenous companies. He understood that the Indian companies need a lot of new blood to be sent into because of the Nehruvian socialist strangling of the Indian industry. But he was very uncomfortable with the foreign investment that was coming, because he saw that the foreign investments were always coming in the consumerist things, and they were changing our way of our culture, our way of life and everything, value system and all that. In a way, when Dr. Murali Manohar Joshi said no, when globalization was coming, the Swadeshi Jagran Manch of Tathopan Tengedi was having a great supporter in Murali Manohar Joshi. And Murali Manohar Joshi coined a very interesting slogan, which at that time the economists were attacking like anything. He said, no to potato chips, yes to computer chips. Today, if you look at the Make in India program, it is essentially that. We are not talking about consumerist things coming inside. We are talking about heavy industries coming inside, particularly arms industries and things coming inside, pharma industry coming inside and all those kind of things. Those things probably Tathopan Tengedi would have supported them.
Thank you. Then we have next question from Sri Charan R. He says, thank you for the disquisition, sir. It was very informative. Just as Tengdi could predict the end of Marxism, could you also share some thoughts on how he rightly predicted the fall of globalism right in the 1980s, and also rightly predicted the global opposition to WTO and such international organizations?
Yes. Tathopan Tengedi was very much against IMF and WTO and GATT. At that time, GATT was there, if you remember. All those kind of things he was opposed to. And unfortunately, we had taken a very strong globalization trend. Probably it was needed at that time. We do not know how it would have gone if there was no globalization. And again, as I said, the digital decentralization and the digital democratization is something that Tathopan Tengedi did not foresee. They have helped actually our cause. They have helped the cause of the dharmic digitalization, possibility of dharmic digitalization. I won't say dharmic digitalization. Possibility of dharmic digitalization, a kind of a colonization of that particular digital space by Indian values, Indian ecosystem. This particular decentralized, democratized digital networks would adapt themselves or make themselves more vulnerable to dharmic takeover than heavy colonial structures. So in that way, what Thadopan Tengiriji said about the IMF and the WTO and World Bank and all those kind of international organizations, we can modify it and tell that today India too can be a equal partner in globalization, and hence we can also influence the term. We won't be passive reception people of the globalization, almost victims of globalization. Whatever they impose, we would take. We have moved away from that. So we can take the checks and balances created by Thadopan Tengiri and apply it to the globalization. Today we are in that position.
Thank you. Now Ravindra Joshi ji wants to ask some question. Ravindra ji, please unmute yourself and you can go on. You are muted, Ravindra ji.
Namaste. So, what about made in India and made by India? How we can shift from made in India to made by India? Which products on priority you think that government of India should take decision made in India?
See,
made by India, yes.
From made by India to made in India, and
no, made
from made by India,
yeah,
right, and made for India, right. Now we have to understand one particular reality, which is that the Indian educational system itself has been deprived of the capacity for creative, innovative thinking.
Right.
So we have been great copycats. I am not telling it in a negative sense.
Yes, yes.
We have been able to copy whatever the Western technology comes. We can say, in a way, we can say that we are like the technological equivalents of Macaulay clerks.
Right.
So whenever a particular technology has come, then we can master the production of it, and then through a lot of industries and with the workforces, we will be able to generate it. So in this way, we can provide cheap labor and we can create a lot of employment, and the economy would go and all that. But if we want to create a product for the sake of Indians, through the Indian minds and through Indian technology, then we need to have an Indian educational system that will sensitize us to the Indian problems and make us look at the problems through the Indian way, right? And that kind of an educational system has to come. And then we will have to create an R&D out of that. And then we will be able to do what you just said. Till then, to run the system, we have to go for this make in India and those kind of things.
Right.
And in a way, when you do this make in India, because of somehow they will have to create technological institutions. They will have to bring technological institutions here, and we can use those technological institutions to make us even more innovative. We need the infrastructure right now. As a person who has studied in government schools and Tamil medium schools, I can say that here the schools are pathetic. For the first time, this government has brought something called as the Atal Tinkering Labs. And these Atal Tinkering Labs have even come to the schools. And because of that, the students are able to do hands-on training with the things. If you remember, Ram Sharma ji can also remember this. When we were 1970s, 1980s people, when was the first time we entered a science lab? We entered the science lab only for our pre-degree or plus two. That too for doing the record works. Already they would give us the results. All we have to do is we have to do the experiment in a mechanical way and we have to write the results and we have to come back and submit the records. But a lab is not for that. The lab is for the child to go and work whatever he wants, even wrong things he should be able to do. But
Right.
that was not allowed. Why that was not allowed? Because the British educational system wanted only to create clerks. Even the labs today that you see today, Jagadish Chandra Bose had to go on a strike. He had to fight to get those labs. Because without labs, people used to do BSc Physics in Calcutta University before that. So the point is this. We
Yes.
have been in a very, very, very bad state.
Yes.
And now for the first time, we are trying to introduce these innovative educations. And that coupled with the sensitizing the students to the Indian experience in education, Indian experience in the society, then we will be able to do this. But I think it would take at least another 5 to 10 years. Unfortunately, time is running out for us because the Chinese threat is there. The China is becoming the new Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Actually, the Cold War between democracy and authoritarianism is not happening between China and United States. Right now, it is happening between India and China. India is a democratic state. China is a totalitarian state, and it is able to create impressive scientific advancements, whereas India is paying a heavy price for democracy. At the same time, it is trying to develop.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we have next question from Amit Kumar Dubey ji. He asks, does he not come across like a Gandhian in many ways?
He does. In fact, his is a continuation of the Gandhian process. I always say this, that if you take the thoughts of Gandhiji, and again here, let us be very clear about this, there is a kind of a aversion for Gandhiji among most of the people who call themselves Hindutvites today. Vocal Hindutvites, I'm not talking about the traditional Hindutvites. Whereas in the traditional Hindutva legacy, Gandhiji has always been venerated. One important reason for the veneration of Gandhiji is that without Gandhiji, you cannot talk about Hindu ecology in modern times. Gandhiji was the person who took the Hindu ecological values and made an encounter for them with modernity. And after that, those aspects of Gandhian thought with relation to environment were moved forward by three people: Deen Dayal Upadhyaya, Tadopant Dhengedji, and Ram Swarup. These are the three people who moved Gandhian thought forward. And hence, if you look at Tadopant Dhengedji's thoughts, yes, they have a Gandhian legacy to it. And they are, we can probably say that it is the Hindutva movement that carried forward Gandhian thoughts on environmentalism, Gandhian thoughts on society, social development to the next stage.
Thank you. If you mentioned Gandhian thoughts on environmentalism, we have next question from Sumati ji. And she says, thank you for that enlightening talk, sir. What do you think would have been his views on the infrastructural changes being carried out in ecologically sensitive regions like the Himalayan foothills, and for example, the state of Uttarakhand? And expert committees have warned against excessive infrastructure building in the region in the name of development. On the other hand, what is at stake is also the basic conveniences of the people living there. How would he have balanced this?
Well, let us be very, very clear about this. He was not a fan of development in a Western sense. So, this big infrastructural developments, I don't think Tadopant Dhengedji would be very happy about. And he would have considered rather development in the Chitrakoot model developed by Nanaji Deshmukh. So, his way of urban planning would be more in tune with the Hindu way of urban planning, which we have lost. The Hindu way of urban planning, Hindu way of town planning was documented by Patrick Geddes, which I have talked about in many lectures before. It's a kind of an organic development of the society. In the West, if you look, Leonardo da Vinci was the one who talked about a kind of looking at a town as an entire living organism and developing it. I think Tathopan Thengadichi would have opted for it, and unfortunately, very unfortunately, this is a kind of town planning. This is a kind of infrastructural development that needs a lot of futuristic technology. With such a futuristic technology, we will be able to develop these town plannings and others. Unfortunately, India is in a very, very complicated point where we have to compete with the West. We have to compete with China. And when we have to compete, we have to, right now, we don't have the luxury of experimenting with these past things. If we are having a natural course of development, then we can use Tathopan Thengadichi's models and we can do. But right now, in a very ideal world, Tathopan Thengadichi's model is far superior to, and we have to work a lot harder, lot intelligently for implementing Tathopan Thengadichi's model of development. Unfortunately, because we don't have the time and because we are in a way we have to develop ourselves into a strong power, not superpower, at least a strong power to counter the threats around us and develop a kind of infrastructure and everything, we have to use right now Tathopan Thengadichi's worldviews as checks and balances. If we cannot go for the entire implementation, we have to use these things as checks and balances, and we have to implement our development.
So Arvindanji, there is this one quote that I find in his work on third wave, and here he is talking about vichar as well as bringing it to attention to the people
Talking
that vichar. Okay, he is I think inaugurating Bharatiya Vichar Kendra, and where he writes the importance of vichar along with prachar. Okay. But I think in RSS circle also, we find a lot of pracharak rather than vicharak. Okay. So his influence in terms of pracharak is we can see all around. But in terms of vicharak, do you think that legacy has not been taken forward? Or am I missing something here when he is comparing vicharak and pracharak?
Well, the vichar has to be done by, all things are not for all people. That is a very important thing. And let me go to the concept of our Varna system and apply it here. And you always have, I am not talking about, you always have, in any system, you always have innovators, you will have seekers who go and seek. They dedicate their entire life for seeking, they go and seek. And then they get the truths revealed to them, they realize the truths and insights, and then they bring it to the society. And then there are people who would take these insights and they would be able to use it for the protection of the society, use it for the financial benefit of the society, for the prosperity of the society. There will be people who will be using these insights for the protection of the society. There will be people who will be using it for the prosperity of the society. There will be people who will be working out these things so that they can reach out to the entire this, and that all people are very happy. They are having what is called Sugam. There will be people who will want Labham. There will be people who will want Viriam, by which they could protect the society. And for all this, you need this. So the vichar is very much important. The pracharak is the person who takes this vichar outside. That we have to understand. So we will be able always to see only the pracharaks. Very, very dominantly, you will be able to see the pracharaks, but this vichar will always be there, and it will be like Saraswati river. It will be there. It has to be there, but it will not be like the intellectual sophistry of the leftist kind. This Vichar is something different. It is not armchair Vedanta. It is not armchair theory. It is a Vichar in which we go into ourselves and we bring out the truths through sadhana. And that is done in a very silent way. It cannot be institutionalized. But it will be the basis of all institutions.
Right. So do you think that his vichars, his systematic expositions on various various fundamental forces that were there are taken forward systematically, written upon, systematically explained, systematically exposed later on after he went away? So I do not find third way. This is the only book that I find that is clearly explaining going beyond two paths. But after when he, because this is collection of article where, from 70s, 80s and 90s. So it's almost 2 decades, 3 decades. But I do not see any other works that has taken his fundamental thoughts, forward, that have not been taken forward by even organization that he belonged to. Or maybe I do not have access to such kind of works. Okay. So can you say that?
I worked in Vivekananda Kendra. In Vivekananda Kendra, we had a separate department called Natural Resource Development Project.
Okay.
This project is something that was taking forward Swami Vivekananda, Mahatma Gandhi, Deen Dayal Upadhyaya's work and Tattopan Dengri's work. They were working. See this kind of, for example, here you have something called Brahmodaya Park. This you have, if you come to Kanyakumari, you will be able to see this. Okay. And there you have the models for, let's say, houses. Models for different sustainable models for houses. Sustainable models of water harvesting. Then sustainable models for energy production. Okay. These kind of things are there, and they have produced wonderful books. For example, see this. It is called Akshay Vikas, for sustainable development. And then you have Samagra Vikas, development with the human face. So these works are going on. There are people who have dedicated their lives and they are working. Unfortunately, these are people who don't come out in the limelight. They are silently doing the work. It is because these people are silently doing the work, when it reaches the critical mass, it will come out. See, when Punjab thoughts come, even, our great Dr. Pairad L. Stephen used to tease us, telling that with all your work, the Sangha has only produced a bunch of thoughts, nothing else. But there were a lot of people who were working on the ground. Inspired by these values, they were living those values. And then when those values attained a critical mass, you see the Ram Janmabhoomi temple coming in a very great, grand manner. The same way, there are people even now working silently, seriously, exploring, working. And I have been blessed and I have been fortunate to be there as a ordinary worker and see what they have been doing and to do some participation in those works. So I can tell with confidence that these people are seriously working. They have created buildings, for example, that can earn carbon credits for India. There is a long way to go, light years to go, of course, to gain the critical mass itself. And our government being there, government that is sympathetic to these views being there. Our government means all governments are our governments in India. But this is a government that is more sympathetic to our core values. That these things will have an acceleration. And I'm 100% sure one day this will attain a critical mass and you will see Tattopan Dengriji's vision becoming reality.
Thank you for
Because
sharing these
writing.
works. Yes, please go ahead.
So next time when you people come to Kanyakumari, I think we'll be able to take you to these places and you can see for yourself those works. I think here you may be able to see certain glimpses of it at least. For example, see this. This is a exactly the house that
Approving
earns carbon
technologies.
credits, low-cost buildings and different types of low-cost buildings and different building technologies and those kinds of stuff. Okay, so the point is, work is going. The work is
Right.
definitely good.
Okay. Thank you for sharing these wonderful work, because it gives us it's quite encouraging to see that thoughts did not get stuck at one point of time. It has been carried forward by a lot of people, and they are working silently. We cannot see them. It doesn't mean that people are not working. It's really informative that you shared all these works. Okay. I'll share, I'll request you to separately share your links of these work with us.
Right.
Anyone else who was interested in asking question? I think there was one gentleman who was interested. So he was sharing his ideas on like Swadeshi, the general thing that you already covered. Okay.
Okay.
That So that he was saying that his work or his works must be read by every karyakarta of RSS, and it's like textbook. He has simplified thoughts of Guruji also. Okay, he has simplified thoughts of various other thinkers which preceded him. Okay, so
And
his
another one
works
aspect
must.
I want to add here, the important aspect is, if you go through his works, you will find that he was up to date with whatever development that was happening in the thought processes of the West also, in the holistic
Exactly.
thought process particularly. And he never differentiated this, they are Milejas, they are white-skinned, they are English educated. Those kind of short things, parochial things never came to him. He was able to see Sanatana Dharma in every thought.
Right.
In all positive thoughts, he was able to see Sanatana Dharma and integrate it with our dharmic experience. So that is another one thing that we right now have to learn from him.
Right, because I think in this culture of anti-Western thinking, we have started accusing, questioning, okay, labeling every thinker, every thinker in the West. Okay, we do not filter out, we do not discriminate between good thinkers and bad thinkers in the West. Okay, we think whatever is coming from the West is polluted, corrupted, and we don't have any. We don't need to be open to that. Okay,
We already
when
have
it
everything.
we already have everything. Like one sense is this, or another thing, whatever will come from the West will be, they will have agenda. There is a conspiracy behind that. There are a group of people who are setting maybe some new or conspiring against every people in the world or something like that. And here, in contrast to the one thing, DG, I see that this chapter on third way on technology, that I found that he mentioned Alvin Toffler.
Alvin
When
Toffler,
he is
yes,
mentioning
yes.
about Alvin Toffler, future shock he
Third wave,
mentioned, even power shift he
future
mentioned.
shock and third wave.
Third wave he mentioned that we should have social control of technology, and he clearly mentioned that when where Alvin Toffler is mentioning that. And when it comes to Fritz of Capra's work, you already mentioned that. Not only people, I think when it comes to chapter on economy, he was quite well versed with all modern thinkers on economy. He quoted them extensively while he was making his own arguments. Okay. He could filter out even Schumacher, even Solzhenitsyn. Okay. So I think that was his genius. That
Yes.
even at one time he was opposing globalism, capitalism, but he was taking care that all Western scholars are not westernized in that sense. They are open. They would like to inquire. They are propagating something beyond materialism also.
This is again
Do you
interesting
think
thing.
that
I will just add
Yes.
that from Rigvedas, let noble thoughts come to us from everywhere. Gandhiji is saying that all my windows are open so that the breezes from everywhere can come, but no storm can take me off my feet. The particular aspect of Tattvapant Tengiriji, that the person who was opposing globalism at one level was for actually integrating the whole thing with all the thoughts from everywhere positively and integrating it with the Indian culture and taking the entire culture and society forward. It's a beautiful thing. A really beautiful thing that we have to learn from him now. Very essential.
And another thing that comes to my mind is like this Swadeshi point. Okay, Swadeshi point is something very tricky. in the sense that, of course, you need to be open at certain point or at certain spaces. And of course, you have to be very discriminatory, not allowing everything in your country. And that is always hard judgment to make. It changes from space to space, from time to time also. Okay. And there I think he has given, maybe I cannot accurately can remember, but he very specifically mentioned that those things which are of necessity, that we should make in India, that should be indigenous. But that those things which are of luxury only, okay, where we have choice, okay, that we should import very carefully with discrimination. But here, if you start importing everything, even of necessity, then you will become reliable or dependent on other countries for your basic needs also. And that became very clear during COVID pandemic. Okay, those countries which are not growing their own crops, those have outsourced agriculture to other countries, can see the consequences of allowing everything run by other foreign powers or dependent on globalization. So extreme globalization will be problematic. So I think he was very careful in opposing globalization and supporting Swadeshi movement. Okay, it's not blind extremist view of Swadeshi, like you cannot allow anything on this country, and you should stop importing anything, right? Can you please share more on that?
Yeah, sure. As I said earlier, that the particular slogan by Dr. Murli Manohar Joshi, yes for computer chips and no for potato chips, is one thing. And he also gave a very interesting example of, if I remember correctly, when United States tried to force Californian apples or oranges on Japanese, and then the Japanese made a decision that they won't buy, let the apples come, or oranges come, but we won't buy a single orange. And then this made the United States retreat. So he was very clear that India should have this sense of what to allow, what not to allow. Should never allow globalization to be a kind of an arm twisting thing. And this became clear for us when during sanctions against Iraq, suddenly they couldn't get any medicines because all the medicines were getting imported. But here now you look at India, we have created the pharma industries that produce medicines. So you don't have a problem. If the United States tomorrow is putting sanctions against India, India will have all the life-saving drugs. India would have produced all the food and everything, aspect, medicines, life-saving medicines and food would be produced in India. So these aspects, Tathopan Tengri was very clear that there should be a selective inflow of things. Where we are deficient, we have to take from them. But we are taking from them not to be eternally dependent on them, but to make sure at a particular point of time we should become independent of that particular deficiency. We should remove those deficiencies. So, in a way, we can say that Tathopan Tengriji's Swadeshi concept is not Luddite Swadeshi. It is a very scientific Swadeshi, a futuristic Swadeshi.
You have aptly put it, very accurately. Arjun, are there any other questions? Or I can see one comment. Namaskar, sir. This is from, I think, Bhattacharya ji. How do we see Shri Guruji through the eyes of Shri Dattopant Thengri?
Guruji has been the mentor. Guruji has been the guiding, inspiring, the very sculptor of Tathopan Tengri. If you imagine Tathopan Tengri as a kind of a beautiful sculpture, Guruji sculpted it with his hands. He made him a prachara. He took him, made him have the experiences of varied organizations. Now remember, when Guruji was doing all this, RSS itself was undergoing a very big problem. Because of Gandhiji's assassination, there has been a great stigma attached to the Sangh. It is at this particular point of time that Sangh was going for diversification And in this particular point of time, the person chosen for the most important diversification of getting into the labor unions, which is totally a leftist area, is Tathopan Tengri. So Guruji had that great faith on Tathopan Tengri, and Tathopan Tengri had the great respect for the Guru and accept whatever the Guru says. And these two hands worked very well. And Tathopan Tengri was, fortunately for the Sangh and for the nation, Guruji had Deen Dayal Upadhyaya and Guruji had Tathopan Tengri and Guruji had, of course, our Eknath Ranade. So he could experiment with this diversification. So for Tathopan Tengri, Guruji is the person who personified all the important qualities: a great thinker, a great lover of humanity. Nobody else in this country has loved humanity the way Guruji loved humanity in this particular modern times. For example, Guruji writes that when you are serving people, never discriminate between Hindu or a Christian or a Muslim or a woman or a man or based on caste or language or race or anything. Serve thinking that you have been given an opportunity to serve the same God, the same Brahman that is enshrined inside the sanctum sanctorum of the temples, the holiest of the holies. Thinking that you are serving that, you have to serve humanity. And this particular aspect has been taken from Guruji and imbibed by Tathopan Tengri, and he lived his life almost like Guruji in action. And Guruji also had a great disdain for state missionaries, state apparatus, state positions of power. The same thing you can see in Tathopan Tengri. Tathopan Tengri has, one cannot say mistrust, but Tathopan Tengri always kept a distance from all seats of power. Even when our own people were there, he kept a distance. He was the person who would never be lured by power and authority and having a car with a red revolving light over the top and ministers and others standing before him. He was not a person who was concerned with all this. He was a person who lived a very simple life. All this comes from Guruji. By seeing Tathopan Tengri, we can understand what a great man Guruji is. So for Tathopan Tengri, Guruji was almost, not almost, Guruji was the Guru who comes before the Bhagavan.
Thank you. Now there's an observation from Sri Charan ji. He says an immediate leader in Tamil Nadu that I can think of who was compatible with Tengri ji's ideas to a large extent is Kamaraj. Is there any link there?
No. Kamaraj and Tathopan Tengri, there was no link directly. But Kamaraj was ousted by Indira Gandhi. Kamaraj wanted to create an alternative for the Dravidian parties, the communist parties and the Congress of Indira Gandhi. So he wanted to create an alliance of, in fact, he worked out an alliance of Jansangh, Swatantra Party and the Sthapan Congress, the original Congress. So that way, Kamaraj came near Jansangh. And Kamaraj was also very, very strongly disturbed by the DMK's anti-Hindu activities. He went to the extent of bringing changes to the freedom of expression state laws so that it would stop. The DMK people were conducting a particular stage drama called Kimayana, in which Rama would be a kind of a joker, and I don't want to comment on how they portrayed Sita, and Ravana would be the great Dravidian king, emperor, and all that. They created something called Kimayana. Okay, and Kamaraj made sure that it was banned. He was not tolerating those kind of things. So, in terms of this kind of thinking, Kamaraj was in sync with us. Kamaraj was in sync with us. But there has been no documented direct relation between Kamaraj and Tadopant Tenggiri. So,
Okay. Thank you, Arvindanji. If I might ask one question.
sure.
Yeah. The title of the talk is Tenggiri Ji, the Dharmic Rebel. So I wonder in what respect can we call him a Dharmic rebel?
He was rebel against the system that has been imposed on us. See, the system that we have right now is essentially a Western system. It has its positive things and it has a lot of negative things also. And the negative things, whenever in a social stagnant mood, the negative things amplify themselves. So if you take our polity, for example, the way the caste vote banks are used by the politicians. Jati has been created to create some kind of social harmony, but the way the present polity has used Jati, it has become vote banks and it has become kind of a mutually abusive system. So these kind of things exist. There is crony capitalism. The crony capitalism is the direct, illegitimate child of socialism. See, today we are liberating ourselves from socialism, then everybody is charged as being a crony capitalist and all that. So in this kind of a situation, we have to use the dharmic wellsprings and we have to fight against the negativities of the system. That is exactly what Tadopant Tenggiri Ji did. He was a rebel for the system. He was not the rebel for the culture. He was a rebel for the system. And the rebel drew his sustenance from Dharma. So he is the dharmic rebel against the system.
So Arvindanji, thank you for coming. Thank you for giving this wonderful talk and having this interesting conversation with us. And we'll keep
I'm also
inviting
thankful
you.
to you, Ramji, for giving this opportunity, and I hope I have done it properly.